Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. What? What are we doing? This is the Wellbeing Show. The heat has finally got to me, and that's it. My brain is shutting down. Not that it had much to shut down, it has to be said. So, a couple of brain cells left. Welcome to the latest episode of the show. I've got a returning guest. Yes, some of them do come back, and Dominique is one of them who has come back for more of this nonsense and punishment on my behalf. But I'm so happy. Dominique is a doctor, a GP, who's been specialising in working with young adults, I suppose, really, going to university and all of the issues around that. So she'll be talking about that with us. As usual, just remember this is pre-recorded. So don't call in while you're watching it, but do send me a message and I can pass them on if you've got a message for Dominique or some questions on 07506 319 745. That's my number. Do like the video if you see it on and press the little bells and all that sort of stuff. It's really helpful if you do that. And I'd love to get comments from you if you're watching it somewhere. Just drop us a comment while you're watching it. I do read them. And where relevant, I'll send them on to Dominique and she can respond as well. It's always good to get your thoughts and views on these issues. That's enough of that. So welcome, Dominique. How are you doing?
Yes, all good, thank you. Recovering, as you say, from the recent heat, but yeah, all good.
How did you survive? Have you got aircon or did you just dig a hole and hide away?
Like everybody else, I think I just lay there and waited for it to go away again.
I surrender.
Absolutely. Please remove this heat. Oh,
I know.
yeah.
It can be quite a challenge for some people. A friend of mine said she was sort of having panic attacks through it.
Oh no, no, that
No,
is
I know she
terrible.
was real having heat
Really
stuff.
serious.
So I basically forced her to buy a mobile air conditioning unit.
Very
This
sensible.
is what you do. You sit in front of that in future.
Yes.
So she's going through particular stresses, having just moved house and all that sort of stuff. So it's like a perfect storm, if you'll forgive.
Mm-mm.
But do take care of yourselves. And as usual, folks, cover yourselves up, drink lots of water, all that sort of stuff. I'm with a doctor. She's nodding away.
Agree.
How many millions of times have you said this to people?
Well, I mean, recently, not so much. Obviously, I'm not practicing as a GP now. I work, that was my job for nearly 20 years, looking after students in a university. But now it's more the work with schools, universities, all around mental health for young people. So, all different topics and a little bit of work with the government, which we may cover in a minute.
Yeah.
And yeah, essentially just trying to make sure the messages around mental health get out there.
Yeah. So tell us about where did you grow up and all that sort of stuff. Just a little bit of sort of context for you so people understand who you are and
Yeah, no,
you
sure.
become this whirlwind.
I'm not sure about that, but a very normal, growing up in Surrey, it was very suburban, went to a girls' school, decided I wanted to be a doctor from a very young age. There are photos of me carrying my little medical bag around when I was, 3 or 4. So I guess that bit was was sort of set in stone. And then went to Bristol Uni, and yeah, here we are, 30 something years later. So
And what attracted you think to healing and helping? What was the sort of pull?
I think a lot of us are in it because we like to solve problems
Yeah.
and we want to do that in various different ways. And our maybe we're drawn to quite a sort of hands-on, literally, holding someone's hand through a difficult time or finding, very empathic ways to support them, be compassionate. So I think, I'm a problem solver first and
Sure.
foremost, which is why I do what I do now as well, which isn't, although I've left medicine behind on a day-to-day clinical basis, I still think I'm doing very similar stuff, which is being presented with problems and thinking, how do we approach this?
Yeah. It's interesting though, and I wonder if you have any thoughts about this. This is less true now, but it still is true to some extent that a young girl thinking of going into some sort of medical practice is more likely or was more likely to think about nursing, etc., doctoring, being a doctor, particularly for the generation that we're talking about, your generation, wasn't necessarily. up there. It's different now. There's lots
Oh,
of
very different now. Yeah.
women doctors now, etc. It's much more normal. Maybe less normal when you were thinking about doing. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, I think we were sort of at the tail end of that, but I certainly had a couple of teachers when I said, I wanted to be a doctor, said, "Do you mean a nurse?" And I said, "No, a doctor." But anyone who actually knew me knew I was quite determined young lady, I believe were the phrases used. And so I think, quite quickly it became apparent, yeah, no, she does mean doctor. But by the time I actually went to medical school, I mean, possibly nearly 50% of us were female. And obviously it's a higher proportion now. So, but yeah, I was probably just at the tail end in the 70s and 80s of being asked, is this what I really meant?
Yeah, yeah. And I know you're not practicing now as a GP.
Mm.
Are you still registered? I'm just so I know
Yeah.
in my mind.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Still registered with the GMC, but not to practice. Yeah.
And we can maybe talk about that so people understand these differences and stuff like that.
Mhm.
There's big conversations in the mental health space about regulation at the moment, which I'm sure you're aware of. It'd
Yeah.
be interesting to get your thoughts on that, what you think about it. So you were clear you wanted to be a doctor, but it is still, I mean, it's not an easy thing to learn. I
Oh
mean,
no.
it's a lot of work. I mean, there must have been times when you thought, what am I doing? Or was it always just like you were so passionate and driven?
No, I think everybody has moments where they doubt themselves. Mine were probably less at medical school. Medical school itself is probably still very organized, and you're sort of doing this for a bit and then a module on this, and you're kind of learning and revising, and you have a structure. So I think that side of it was not really where I doubted it. I think probably a year or two after I graduated, when you're doing, or as we were doing in those days, thank goodness it's not anymore, 120-hour weeks, and seeing and dealing with all sorts of things. Obviously, you're thrown in at the deep end. I think there were times where I sort of thought, is this what it's going to be like the whole time? And of course, it isn't. But yeah, you do occasionally have moments where you think, can I get through this? How do I get through
Of
this?
course,
And
you must have
yeah,
done. It would be
yeah,
exhausting. So,
yeah.
how could you not? But that was when you were like what was called a junior doctor in a
That's
hospital.
it. Yeah, yeah. Now I
Brilliant.
think they're called resident doctors, but yeah, we were junior doctors. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, hours have changed, but I still think even now, the commitment that a junior doctor makes is extraordinary.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
and also, I think, like, even now, people don't understand. And I think partly why the name changed to resident as opposed to junior is people don't understand that as a junior doctor, you're a doctor doing doctoring.
Yes, this is true, but sometimes I would, and going back to your previous comments, approach the patient, say, "Hello, I'm Dr. Thompson," and they'd ask me for, was I the dietitian? Was I the nurse? Um, Sometimes was I the cleaner? I've certainly had all
No,
that. Oh
get
yeah,
out of
no, no,
here.
you definitely do. As a female doctor, get asked all sorts of strange things. People, even though you've just introduced yourself, don't understand your role. So there was a bit of that, but that wasn't really, I didn't worry too much about that. Just correct people, move on.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I mean, what has changed now is I suspect the intensity of what they're doing. So although the hours might be more monitored and so on, the intensity of their work, I suspect, is even greater than it was 20, 30 years ago. So, their
Some
shifts
more complicated.
exhausting, more complicated. There are more
More
tests, there is more
technological,
to
there's
know.
more knowledge. Of course, the knowledge base has grown.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I guess that's sort of explains why there's so many specialisms now. It's sort of like
yes,
gone are the days, really, of when you could have been a generalist who would be able to do everything. And now we have general doctors, of course, GPs,
yes.
but we also have a lot of specialisms. And even GPs now will have specialisms, I think. Is that correct?
They do, yes. People have special interests. Mine was mental health. I had colleagues who were interested in sports medicine or infectious diseases, dermatology. Yes, so GPs obviously still try and cover everything, but they will have a special interest in many cases.
So you did all your sort of training in a hospital, like all doctors do,
Mhm.
and you decided to be a general practitioner.
Yes,
Correct?
yes, yes. I did. I wasn't sure that that was going to be for me either. I have to say, as I said, I had these moments where I was thinking, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
The specialty that I perhaps had thought I would want to do. So when I was at medical school, if you'd asked me, I thought maybe I'm going to be a pediatrician. That was the thing I
Oh,
thought I
right.
wanted to do. So I got into
Not psychiatry,
no,
is it?
not at all. At that point, no. That only came when I did general practice. I didn't do any junior doctor training in psychiatry. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I went and did a year of pediatrics. So that's longer than the average. So junior doctor jobs tended to be 6 months, and I'd done a variety, so obs and gynae and medicine and surgery and think A&E. And I thought, no, pediatrics, I think, is what I want to do. And I did a year and thought, well, that's not what I want to do.
I mean,
So
I can guess why, because it would just break my heart on a daily
it was
basis.
pretty tough, I have to say. It
Yeah.
was draining and it's also a lot more, if I can say, a lot more technical than I like to talk to people. I like to, this is what was becoming apparent was that I just like to talk to people. And so I wasn't so keen on, measuring out doses and worrying about, specific treatments and all that. I mean, obviously I worried about it, but what I mean is that wasn't where I got fired up and excited. So at that point, I started to think, well, what could I do that would bring all this together for now, and then I could make a decision, but not necessarily forever. And I started a general practice rotation because in those days you could then just choose to do that. So I signed up for a year in a fairly sort of inner city area of Bristol. And within 2 weeks, I thought, why has nobody told me about this before? I love it.
Really?
I
Wow.
absolutely loved it. Every 10 minutes, and you never knew what was going to walk in the door next, what problem they would bring to you. And of
Oh,
course, you did deal with children, but also every other, type of problem and person and family. And I absolutely loved it. And so I never looked back then. Yeah.
great. It was the variety, like,
Yeah.
what else grabbed you about it, do you think? 'Cause, I
Um,
mean, I can't think, I mean, uh, on a personal level, if I was seeing that many people, I think I'd just be blown away and overwhelmed.
yeah.
But what else did you like about it, you think?
Well, I think what I liked, apart from the variety, was that you got to see people again.
Yeah.
So A&E, they would say they have variety, and I absolutely agree. But they probably don't follow them up. They probably don't, unless there's an unfortunate situation. They're not likely, hopefully, maybe to see them again. Whereas I wanted to see people again. I wanted to get to know them. And for
Okay.
me, and certainly this is 25 years ago, the continuity of care was the absolute bedrock of what we were doing. Now, I know that's been lost a little bit, and that's why I feel sad some of the changes that have happened in general practice, not the fault of the GPs, this is or the people who work there, but for me, it was all about getting to know someone. And so when they came back with something, you think, oh, but hang on, we had this before, or there's context, and you were able to bring a depth to that consultation that doesn't happen if you just meet somebody for the first time and have 10 minutes to sort it out.
Sure, sure. I mean, I have to say, I sort of know most of the doctors at my GP practice, and they know me. And
Mm.
like, it reaches a point where if there's a new member of staff, they'll say he knows what he's talking about. Just listen to him.
Yes.
I'm one of those annoying professionals that turns up and knows loads about it, you know. So,
No, that's great. But
but the
yeah, not
relationships are
everybody has
there.
that.
So,
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
the relationship's there. So I understand what you mean. And
Mm.
then you somehow began to get interested in the sort of mental health side of things, which
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me, given a GP practice would be seeing quite a lot of that, to be honest.
That's right. So, having not really had any particular interest or training in mental health, suddenly I was seeing quite a lot of it every day. And I found it really fascinating, but I was lucky that my trainer, so as a GP trainee, that first year, you have a trainer, a GP that you're paired with, was superb in mental health and got me sort of thinking about it, doing sort of maybe extra clinics, maybe thinking about sitting in with psychiatrists, all that sort of thing. So I really tried to sort of up my game there. And then I did some locum work, and then I discovered student health as a sort of it's not officially a subspecialty, but it should be. And so I went to work at the university practice as a sort of everyday GP, full time, seeing students every day. And that's where, over the years, not initially, I became more and more interested in mental health. And that's where it really developed. So, young people's mental health in particular.
Yeah, and we've just seen today figures produce about 1 million children referred in for
Yes.
mental health services. I
Yes.
mean, it's explosive, the growth, and it's not to be, we will talk more about this, but it cannot possibly be explained away by NIMBYism, snowflakeism, any of that stuff. It's just,
None of which I believe in, quite right. You're
no,
right. It isn't.
absolutely, it cannot be explained away by we've got a weaker generation. It's absolutely
Absolutely not.
horrific statements that are coming out of
Yes.
the press,
Yes.
despite all the objective evidence that things are tough for kids at the moment.
Yes. Yes.
They just want to completely deny it and
Oh, some people
sidetrack
do.
it, and it's horrific. But we'll come back to that. So, sort of you, I mean, it is interesting, and I wonder what you think about this as sort of what your response is as a doctor with this extensive background. I mean, I would guess that in a general practice, in a student practice as well, a general practicing for students, um, a significant portion of the work is taken up with ACEs, people who have adverse childhood experiences, and the presentations of that later in life and how it recurs because it's
Yes.
untreated.
Yeah.
Substance misuse, alcoholism, mental health. I would say
Hmm.
that those types of things would be the significant core cohort of patients turning up regularly to a GP practice. Would that be true or not in your experience?
Yes, about 50% of the consultations when we did a very small study with some university practices, we found about 50% were for mental health of the consultations with a GP. Whereas if you went into what I call civilian general practice, so normal general practice, it's about 1 in 3. Those were the figures a few years ago. I haven't looked recently. So there's no doubt that quite a lot of the day-to-day is made up of that. But obviously, you get lots of other things, everything from, sports injuries and,
Yeah.
infectious diseases from travel. And a lot of them will have, all the usual sort of, whether it's sort of colitis, ulcerative colitis, or lung disease, and all the things that young people can have, but can come to university and have to manage diabetes, asthma, and so on. So we have the kind of chronic diseases, same as other practices. But yes, you're absolutely right that a big proportion of it is mental health. Potentially underlying it is the ACEs side of things, but obviously we know that academic pressure is in
Yeah.
fact the number one cause of stress for most students that leads to some of these issues. And just to say, this generation drink less alcohol.
That's correct. I mean,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
since 2015, there's been a drive
yeah.
to stop underage drinking. We've seen a
Yes.
significant rise in the number of young people who never drink at all.
That's right. So when I talk to, for example, sixth formers, and I give my talks to sixth formers, prepare them for life after school, and some of that's going to university, I get them to try and guess what proportion of students never drink alcohol. And they're all thinking maybe 1 in 10, but it's about between 1 in 4, 1 in 3 now, up to
I know it's great news.
30%. It's huge numbers don't drink at all.
And you see it a lot. They sing about celebrating a sober lifestyle, and it's got nothing to do with alcoholism and people joining those treatment
No, no.
programs. It's people who've never drunk and they enjoy, like all young people, they want to go out and have a club, but they don't want to be around people who are drunk
Yes.
because of all the other stuff that goes on, the drugs, the rape stuff, the violence, all the nonsense that goes on with
Mm,
alcohol, which is
yeah.
just not attractive at all to young people. It's fantastic, I think.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I have to say, as GPs and having watched, and I've been a medical student and seen it all go all through, I see them embracing a different kind of lifestyle, and I do celebrate it for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, I mean, I think you know this, we've got Alcohol Awareness Week coming up, and I just happen to be writing about it for my
Okay.
PR team. So I've got the figures in my mind. It is the alcohol is the highest or the most widespread number one public health problem around the globe
Yes.
moment. And the new guidelines that are out, not so new, but the guidelines from the World Health Organization are, because as you know, it's a class one carcinogen. It creates 7 different types of cancer, etc., etc. There is no safe level of drinking.
Yeah.
The
No,
bottom
no, I
line, that's what people need to know.
they do. They don't always want to know, but I think the younger generation have heard that message.
And they're getting it, which is great. So, but you're getting like 50%, half of your caseload are
Mm.
presenting due to mental health issues. When you say mental health issues, I mean, could you give us a sort of broad brush understanding of the types of the severity, the co-occurrence, etc.? What do you see
Sure.
clinically?
Yeah, I mean, a bit like the study that you just mentioned today that showed the 1 million young people being referred, the number one reason is anxiety. It's the same in general practice and for our counselling services. So all universities have a counselling service and they would say the same. The number one thing they see is anxiety. And that can be, I mean, that can be your generalized anxiety where you just worry about everything, but it's also the social phobias. It can include obsessive compulsive disorder, all the things that we would see in our young people.
And would you include
Yeah.
things like anorexia in that or
No, no.
separate
So
category?
that's right. So then you've got your depression and all mood-related disorders.
Okay.
Very, very common. I'm not quite including bipolar because obviously that's slightly different again. We do that. That is an age of the student age group, 18-25 roughly, where obviously quite a lot of these bigger perhaps more difficult conditions also appear for the first time, as you'll be aware. So that's your bipolar conditions, your psychosis.
These sort of early onset stuff.
Yeah, we would be perhaps the first place that they'd ever sought help, sometimes brought in by flatmates or a lecturer who'd noticed something. So that's quite common to happen at university.
Yeah.
Then you've got your eating disorder group, which is significant and has risen over the last few years. Sadly, post-COVID, we've seen many more young people struggling with their eating, with their body image.
Sure.
And we are now seeing many more young men in that category than we ever did.
Indeed. I mean, I know that as well. And when you say eating disorders, are you
Mm.
at the extreme, so the overeating or the undereating? Which
Mainly, we're talking about when we're talking about it in practice, we'd be talking about so anorexia, bulimia, mixed picture, but not overeating in the sense of obesity and
okay.
leading to obesity. Just obviously that is
So
an issue.
the
Yes,
anorexic type
yeah,
B,
yeah.
the bulimic, and the bulimic is always quite difficult to spot because they look healthy, whatever that means.
Can do. That's right. Yes, yes,
But they've
yes.
got very destructive food patterns
Behaviors.
and
Yeah.
purging patterns and
Yes, yeah. So we
um,
see a lot of that. And then, you've got obviously you're going to have a whole range of people come to university. So they might be coming with problems like PTSD, and then we've got the whole group who are potentially neurodivergent, and that
yeah.
in itself is commonly associated with anxiety, for example. So they may have never been diagnosed as neurodivergent, but they will come, and then when you talk to them, you realize actually they're coming with their anxiety, but it's related to what's been happening.
And it's important to know because, as you know, but just to inform the public, treatments for anxiety and depression with somebody who's neurodivergent are radically different to somebody who's neurotypical. A
They can be.
neurodivergent person does not respond, for example, to medication in the same way. They may not respond to CBT in the same way because
Correct.
they're processing information in different ways and they need very
Yeah,
specific types of services to support.
that's right. And they can be very sensitive to medications, as you said. So,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
But
yeah,
also you then get this problem of treatment resistance, don't you? If you're not diagnosing people correctly and then you're giving them an inappropriate treatment,
yeah,
you are sort of making the problem worse potentially and much more difficult for that person to seek help and
yeah.
believe that help can work. Were you doing a lot of referrals for assessments of ADHD and autism?
Yes, when I left, which is now sort of 8, 9 years ago, already our referrals had gone up significantly. And I now know, I mean, everybody knows this has become a national challenge with ridiculous waits for diagnosis
I know.
and the help that they need
Yeah.
and this extra support they might need at university. And none of all of that hinges on maybe potentially having a formal diagnosis. In fact, universities are now much more flexible and understand that if you are being referred, actually, even that in itself may be enough to be able to get the help. And if you identify as having specific needs for help, they will often help you anyway. So,
And there are some roadblocks as well, I think, in some institutions. I don't know if it's true in universities, but certainly in schools, you may know more about this, but they often won't accept a private assessment. They'll only accept an NHS assessment, which is putting more pressure on NHS services and the student and so on. Is that still the case? Is that your experience?
It has certainly been the case. I couldn't say right now what universities are saying because they've had to adapt so much, but I can tell you that was certainly the case until quite recently. Yeah.
And of
Yeah.
course, you'll know as well, and this is more about giving information to the public. The latest diagnosing practices are AUHD, which is ADHD with autistic features, because it was always thought the two were incompatible, but now it's
Yeah.
just saying no, actually, they're probably complementary and run
Yeah.
parallel and run together
Yeah.
and I think we're going to see a reformulation of this whole field anyway. So
Oh,
um,
I hope so
as
in
we
a
see
way.
more of it, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but a refinement of the diagnostic criteria and practices
Sure.
are much
Yeah.
needed, really.
Yes.
I started my career, my training, my long placement in my training was in autism. We didn't even have the word for it then.
Yes.
Autistic spectrum disorder didn't exist. And so we're making up words for what we saw. So
Mm,
it's
mm.
amazing to see it change. And I feel quite
Yes.
emotional having seen the improvements. And do you want to touch on any of the issues of body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia, trans? Were they presenting? Was that an issue?
Yes, so obviously slightly different things. So the body dysmorphia, definitely, we've always had a few students who would present with that. We have, as I said, now seen more young males coming forward with those sorts of issues. And I think the good thing is that's now being,
It's that part of that looks maxing stuff that's going on in that horrific
yes.
manosphere nonsense.
Yes, yes, that is a potential risk from your body dysmorphias that you might try to affect your physical looks in a quite aggressive way, unfortunately. Yes, so that's something that I think people are much more open to, aware of, looking for, alert to. So there's that side of things. Around gender, I have to say, 8, 9 years ago, even 10 years ago when I was still practicing, it was a new ish challenge for us to be trying to get referrals made. We
Yeah.
would see students, but there weren't many coming through at that stage. My understanding is that has significantly increased from, I mean, I speak to colleagues who work in universities, well, a lot, and they have had to radically change their approach in terms of just the number of students who, excuse me, who need support and for whom mental health is a significant issue because we just know that our students who are identifying as LGBTQ, especially the trans group, are at the highest risk of mental health challenges and therefore must be
I mean, the
supported.
evidence is quite clear that
Yes,
groups that face oppressive practices
yes,
and exclusionary practices have much higher rates of very serious mental health problems,
yes.
between PTSD, depression to suicidal levels,
Mm, mm.
substance misuse, social isolation, etc., etc. It's a disaster. Whatever you think of the politics of it, the human beings are being broken by
Yes,
what's going on, and that's all I'm concerned about here. Really, is that.
yeah,
I mean, as you know, the BMA recently came out with a statement on the Human Rights Commission response to the law, saying it's scientifically invalid what they're saying. So good, well done, BMA, for being so clear about that.
yes.
So,
It's a real minefield, but what I guess for people listening, if they know somebody at university or somebody is going to university, that sort of thing, is to say universities are generally speaking a very safe place, a very supportive environment.
as they should be.
And these days, there is so much in terms of peer support, groups, and obviously the counselling services and all of that. So not to worry that when you get there or when you're there, there should be lots of support there.
And we're seeing a bill through Parliament at the moment to make it illegal to do conversion practices, which is
Oh,
long
finally.
overdue. I'm sort of annoyed with West Streeting, like get on with it, and then he's obviously chasing being a prime minister. I was like, all right, go away. Well, like
Yes,
he should have had this done a long time ago. But it's good to see it
absolutely.
finally before,
Yes, yes,
and finally we'll see that made illegal as it should be.
yes.
I refuse to call it therapy. It's not. It's those practices are horrific and
Mhm.
they should be stopped. So,
Yeah, yes.
for people who don't know, go and check out conversion practice. You could Google it.
Mm.
So that covers the ground. Great.
Yes.
We've got to this point. And so, why would you, in your clinical professional experience, what do you think are the reasons why we're seeing a greater presentation of mental health issues amongst young
Mm,
people,
mm.
children? What's your sort of understanding of why that is coming about?
Well, I think just to put some context in, there is no one single thing. So just, I know you'll know this, but just to be very clear, there is no one single answer. People always hope, I suppose, that there is one thing, and if we just fix that, it would fix
We've got a
everything.
magic bullet,
Yeah,
that sort of
that
thing.
does not exist.
Yeah.
We know that this problem, this rising numbers of young people struggling and complexity was happening before the pandemic. So we also know this is not COVID related, but COVID made it worse. So I think, we've just got to sort of
So
set out.
COVID, in my experience, what it
Yeah.
did was like there were people that were over the edge, there were people that
Mm,
were close to the edge, and there were people far away from it, and it just shifted everybody that way, didn't it?
exactly.
So
And
that
this,
the people who were already over the edge became much more severe. The
yeah.
people that were close to the edge went over the edge, and
Mhm.
that's my understanding. But those problems
Exactly.
were there, and
Yes.
they probably
No,
were going
that's
to
right.
emerge over time anyway. Is that right?
They might have done or they might have managed. That's the thing. For example, with eating disorders, there are a lot of people who were teetering and perhaps not have the healthiest, but maybe they would have moved on. Maybe their lives would have changed. Maybe they would have got better. The minute COVID hit, it pushed them over that edge. And so
Um,
I think, this is
I
the sort of
agree, but also
diversity.
we had seen a 40% increase in hospitalizations for eating disorders amongst children
Yes, children.
prior to the pandemic. I mean, it was already horrifically going through the roof. So there
It
was
was.
already a significant problem of a
Yeah.
lack of intervention early enough, a lack
Mm.
of understanding of the issues, a lack of services. Because,
Yes.
of course, we don't want kids in hospitals. It's the last thing where we want them to be with these
Yeah.
types of issues. So,
Yeah.
but I interrupted. So
No, no, that's
there's,
fine.
there's a broad set of reasons. The pandemic being one of the factors
Accelerants.
that it accelerated. Okay.
Yes, yes. But before that, I think I'd noticed a few things, and not just me, obviously, but that I was aware were affecting, for example, my students. And then when I started to look around, I thought that these seemed to be affecting. And one of the things that was fascinating to me was the rise in perfectionism. So I talk a lot about this
I
in my.
remember us talking about that.
Yes, we've
Yeah.
talked about that before, and how much more perfectionistic the younger generation were becoming. And that study that was
Wrote a book
published.
about that, didn't you?
Well, I didn't write a book about perfectionism. I did a TEDx talk about it.
Yes, that's right.
Yes,
Yes, I
but it's
remember. It's
mentioned in
great
my.
work. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really fascinating. But the those who've studied it and the academics who published on it published their findings from 30 years of reviews in 2017, and they have just published the follow-up to see whether this is still going
Wow.
up, or is it no, it's still going up. It's gone higher. So
Cool.
this is not a problem that's going away, which I think is really interesting for our younger generation. The pressure that they are under to feel and be and act perfect.
And can you give us just a few bullet points about perfectionism and what it does, and
Yeah.
why you know that it's destructive?
Yes, so we know that the more perfectionistic you are, the more likely, not guaranteed, the more likely you are to struggle with your mental health. So you're more likely to have anxiety or depression or eating issues, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and unfortunately self-harm and suicidal thinking. So we know those are strongly associated with perfectionistic traits. And therefore, if we can reduce the perfectionism and the drive to be perfectionistic, maybe we've got a chance to reduce some of those longer term mental health challenges.
And how much of that perfectionism is driven by this image culture, but also by the output culture in schools now? Like schools are I'm not blaming schools. This is policy stuff that's happened, but you've got to get X number of qualifications, etc.,
Mhm,
etc.
mhm,
If you
mhm.
don't do that, your life's over, apparently.
I would
You know
say
what I
it
mean?
comes from multiple pressure points. So this possibly our education system is one of them. I mean, the problem is because the studies show the perfectionism has gone up, but nobody has like, oh, what's the cause? There's one cause. And this is where it gets interesting. So I would suggest that our education system doesn't help, but this is an international finding.
Cool.
So it's going to be whatever's happening all around the world.
But
I
if the pressure on young people isn't
Yeah.
just in the UK.
No, 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 no.
Academic pressures are global at the moment.
Yes.
It's competition is really there, I think.
So this is the next thing that's fascinating is where we've made life more competitive than it needs to be in every aspect of life. And this is where I do sort of perhaps differentiate myself from some of the other speakers on this is I think this is one of the things that we really should be challenging is we've gone wrong in a society where we've made every fun thing competitive,
Yeah.
where we've made everything from, cooking and painting and sculpture and pottery and knitting through to baking cakes competitive. I think that is a massive wrong turn.
It's really interesting because I was with a teacher friend of mine. She's sort of working with younger kids, but in the state sector. And she used a term called learning through play when what she was talking about was playtime in the
Mhm.
playground
Yeah.
in between lessons. So this is lunchtime. But the teaching unions, professions had to name it something so teachers would be paid for that time. And then they have to do something with it rather than just letting kids run around and stuff like that. And I
Yes.
just went, I mean, I have really complex thoughts and feelings about that, I have to
Mhm.
say.
Yeah.
And when is the time you can be just a kid, please?
Right.
Do you
Yeah,
know what I
I
mean? That's
agree.
the, am I just old and out of touch?
No, no, I definitely don't think you're old now. Touch on that. I think that is absolutely spot on. And this is all of these things, when we look at it, the overstructuring of their lives, this pressure to be perfect, to win at everything, to be the best. You can't just, bake a cake. It has to be the best cake. All of these things put pressure on their generation and they believe that's what they have to do because they don't know a world where that isn't the case, where you don't compete on every level.
And the
So that
social
I
media
think is
stuff,
really
would that
important.
be feeding in, do you think?
Yes. And
I
then
knew
the
you were going to
social
say
media,
yes, but I have to pretend I'm asking you a question. I know what you're
you
answering.
know the answer. It magnifies all of that. So I'm not anti-social media. I'm just saying in this aspect, it magnifies the
As
competition.
a
And
mental health professional, people might be confused by this statement. I think social media is great.
yeah,
I think for certain things like social anxiety, it's a godsend.
yeah,
I think for things like women who are struggling alone or farmers struggling alone, hard to reach communities,
mhm,
this online all the time is super, absolutely fantastic. And also, what would have happened to us if we hadn't had like Zoom, etc., during the pandemic? It would have
right.
been horrific, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
this technology, I think, is fantastic, I have to
Hmm.
say. But I do, and I don't know what you think, you have your own opinion, obviously, but I do support the ban for under 16s around social media platforms because my feeling is these platforms with user-generated content, we've given them enough time to sort that content out, and we've given them enough time to put guardrails in, and they have no interest in doing that. And I don't think individual parents can take them on. I do think the corporate parent, the state, has to start setting some rules and boundaries here. That's where I stake myself out in the grain. What's your view on the whole
It
stuff?
differs from your view. I don't support the ban. I don't think it will, I'm not sure it answers the or challenges the problem that we think we have. So I'm not sure what the problem is it's supposed to solve other than just theoretically to just stop them looking at social media and connecting with each other online. But when we know that belonging is the most fundamental thing for human well-being, and for a lot of young people, they belong through their social connections, whether we agree with the content or not at this point, then taking away their belonging and their connection to their societies and peer groups, I don't think is the right thing to do. But that doesn't mean I agree with everything that's online. So I still believe that the government should be tackling the tech companies. I understand they don't want to do it themselves, but I don't think the onus and the punishment almost should be to the young people for whom it is their social connection, and any more than it should be on the parents to then monitor, make sure they've changed their, passwords, and all for schools either. So I think it's a complex problem, and we're trying to solve it again with a sort of silver bullet approach. And I don't think it's going to solve the problem that we think it's going to solve. They'll find ways round the ban, so they'll still be
The
online.
initial figures from Australia are it is seen a reduction of 2 to 3%, or
It's
2 to
minimal,
3%. It seems
exactly.
quite small.
Yes.
My, we're not going to have that debate, but it's
No, no,
interesting
that's
to
fine.
get your view on these things. We
Yeah.
will see the band's coming in, and then we'll have to see how it's. I think
Yes.
there's hope in the UK because it's all very much fuzzy. The way we do law is very fuzzy anyway. It's all
Yeah.
case law and applications and all that sort of stuff. So we'll see how it goes.
Mm.
I do think that the more we generate the conversation, the better.
Oh, yes. No, no, absolutely. I think we
Teaching
should have the
something with.
conversation. I
I'm
think,
guessing the lack of social connection, because we're going to get onto this, is
yeah.
also fundamental to this conversation about why is there a rise in
Mm.
mental health problems. Now, you
Yeah.
know Glasgow, and it's always been an interesting public health anomaly in that many of the health outcomes in Glasgow are worse than anywhere else in the
Oh,
UK,
yeah. Yeah.
even where you compare them to comparable, particularly amongst men. And one of the things that about men in Glasgow where they were dying 5 to 10 years sooner than men elsewhere in the UK. Again, when you factor in all the other lifestyle things, and one of the things that seemed to emerge was that men in Glasgow lived much more isolated lives, the ones that were dying sooner.
Hmm.
They didn't have social connections, and that seems to be one of the core causes. Now, would that be true in the rise of mental health issues in general, do you think?
So, yes, we can say that we are seeing some young people feel much more isolated. We are seeing more university students, for example, stating when asked in surveys, "Are you lonely?" More of them are feeling lonely and isolated, even though they're surrounded by people. So, yes, we have seen a trend in that, and that may be part of why we're seeing more mental health challenges as well. Um, I think one of the areas that I've focused on, and maybe we've got a minute to talk about it here, is social ostracism. So that
Right.
is where young people are actively cancelled or isolated by their peers. And that is something that I think has risen, and certainly the impact on young people has risen. So let me just explain a bit more about it, because social ostracism isn't something we sort of casually talk about as a topic. But it is essentially peers cancelling peers, and that's happening at school age and it's happening at university age as well as possibly, quite possibly later on. But I'm focused very much on these sort of from the 11 to 25-year-olds. That's been my area of interest.
Mhm.
And this, if I can say phenomenon, but the problem, and I will absolutely say this up front, is we have so little research on it. But everywhere I go, everywhere I talk to teachers, to university staff, to the young people themselves, to teenagers and students, they say, oh, this is happening in their classes, in their rooms, in their accommodation, wherever it is. Everyone tells me about cases they're aware of right now where a young person has been cast out, isolated. And the problem I think that has changed, and this is where I think it is fundamentally different from, say, 30, 40 years ago, is if you were sent to Coventry, as we might have said, or, ignored, you were ignored or sent to Coventry within your small group. But it didn't spread like wildfire through the whole organization and into all your other social groups, and then follow you on to wherever you went next. And that is the thing that seems to be creating devastating impacts on the young people affected. So that is something I've got very interested in, and I'm now leading a national work stream on this social ostracism with the DFE, Department for Education, because they've recognised and seen, unfortunately, cases where young people have taken their own lives because of being cut off and isolated and ostracised.
And is that because young people are living more online, and so the implications are much broader? Because we know this thing about cyberbullying can be quite devastating and quite extreme, because they're living much more interconnected lives, as it were, so it can spread much more.
So I think you're right. It spreads more because they're more interconnected and online, as well as the fact is that many of these cases are what I would call the face-to-face people that they're surrounded by.
Right.
So it's their friends, it's their bunch of people at school, their peers. And when it happens, it seems to be spreading so fast that a teacher said to me the other day, we used to deal with this. Like if somebody fell out with somebody else and then so and so wasn't talking to that group of friends, they would have time, they would talk to them, they would sit down, there would be mediation. There is no time for any of that now. It has spread so fast, they can't get ahead of it. It's like wildfire. And the problem is for that young person, you can imagine the fire basically spreads all around them and all their bridges are burnt and they've got no connections and they become super isolated very, very quickly. And that bit is the bit that is associated with poor mental health, the long-term impact of that.
I remember in my training, I'll give you some information from my training. There was a very interesting cases around this, but I'm interested in, are there specific themes to the ostracism? Do they follow certain patterns or themes and narratives about people? What are the sort of things that people are being ostracized for?
Yes, so it seems, and you have to give me a little bit of leeway here. I'm not an academic. This is just from what I'm being told,
Yep,
and
yep,
we
yep.
are hoping to get some research on this. But essentially, it seems to be probably along three tracks. You can be cut off because you're a bit different, and that I think has been a human trait for a long
Yep.
time. People just get a bit isolated. It's worse, but that's one, just being a bit different. Then there's the group where you maybe have different, if I can say, political views, different views, and our society has become more polarized, and
Yeah,
so
definitely. It's much
yeah,
more extreme.
much more
Without
polarized.
doubt. Yeah.
So they just don't want to deal with it, so you're cut off. And then you've got the group who are in some way perceived or believed to have done something wrong that might be an actual misdemeanor within the social group. It might be believed, but not no proof. There's been an unfortunate series of events, if I can put it that way. But before there's any consideration of whether there's any proof or that there might be two sides to any story or anything like that, that person has been judged and
Almost
yeah,
vigilanteism, like, pitchforks going up to
yeah,
Frankenstein's castle, etc., that sort of stuff.
they are cut out and that's it. Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting about it, you've said we used to send people to Coventry. I've been sent to
Mm,
Coventry. It is an extraordinary fear-making event
yes.
because we're social animals, and to be isolated, like it's literally the only thing that I can think of that is destructive fundamentally to human psyches to have no human contact.
Yeah.
We studied, when I was training, we studied anthropological sort of approaches to health and well-being around the globe, and we looked at cultures that didn't have word for depression but had the symptoms. And we came across this term called social death, which is a
Mm,
term that's used in anthropology terms. And he describes small cultures, really, that are isolated from the outside world, where somebody would be ostracized from that community.
mm,
They would be given food, shelter, all of that sort of, but no human contact.
mm.
Ultimately, they died
Yeah.
through that lack of contact,
Yeah.
through the lack of human support and interaction. Even though they had food and all this sort of stuff, they weren't treated poorly in that way. But the ostracism had
Mm,
absolutely dire death consequences. And it does seem to be linked to what I was saying earlier about the men in Glasgow who are dying through social
yeah.
isolation. And we're seeing much more loneliness amongst older people, and that being a cause of mortality, not just
Mhm.
morbidity, but mortality itself. So I would say it's a very, very serious issue.
Yes.
I know psychologically it's a very, very serious issue for the human psyche
Mm.
to feel cast out.
Yes, it is. And it is devastating for a young person if they feel this is going to be their life now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, certainly I'm hoping that we're going to move forwards with some of this work because the things that have shocked me when I've started to look into this is, first of all, that there's no research in the UK that really focuses on what's happening right now, but also there are no resources for them. So if this has happened to you, in the UK, I always think we're a pretty good country for charity, for everything. We've got a website for everything. We've got a
Or a
helpline.
support group for this and that. And
Absolutely, right? There is nothing for this group of young people who have been
is it
cut
because
off.
we don't take it seriously? It's just very new.
Well, I think, I mean, as you said, no, the behavior is a human behavior and is not new, but how bad it becomes so quickly and how devastating it is, I think that is a new feature. But I think it's something people just haven't thought about is how they might need additional support and guidance about where to go, what to do now, who to seek advice from. The fact that, just giving them some hope. Looking for protective factors, those sorts of things that as psychological people we would think about. and anything for their parents or their families either. There's just nothing. And I'm hoping that one of the things that we will get out of this project is people talking about where can we put some resources? Where can we create a web page on our website? So for Young Minds or Mind or somebody would create something. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that would be the way through, but creating resilience factors and a toolkit for kids
Yes.
facing this, as
Yes.
well as educational resources for schools so they can tackle this at the root cause and
Yes.
manage it and look at why it's happening, what the phenomenon is. I guess there's no research yet, so we don't know if it's postcoded, if it's based upon certain things. We're going to have to finish, but in terms
Yeah.
of the rise in mental health issues,
Mm.
again, I might finish on this if you like.
Mm.
How much of a factor is GDP, the struggle to make ends meet? How much of that is a factor in the rise in mental health struggles? I want to say Brexit just because it's hit GDP
Mm.
rather than any political statement, but it was a big economic shock. I mean, there was research produced just this year in England and Wales that shows that when there's a global economic shock, such as the Iran war,
Mm.
certainly in England and Wales, there's a daily increase in the number of suicides.
Mm.
So we
Mm.
know there's a direct, and it's establishing a causal link between the two.
Yeah.
But I wonder broadly if the experience is with the increase in poverty and inequality
Yeah.
and that those types of issues.
Yeah, no, I mean, we didn't cover this, but you're absolutely right. Poverty is fundamentally one of the commonest causes of children's mental health challenges, and obviously that will carry on through life. So, alongside, the broader terms of adverse childhood experiences, poverty underlies all of that. We also know parental mental health has a huge impact on child mental health. So, if your parents are struggling because of GDP and Brexit or whatever else, it's going to have that knock-on effect of negativity for the children. So, and then just a different angle, this is not something I'm an expert in, but one of the main researchers of perfectionism, he believes that it is strongly associated with the changes in the economic pressures of the
I mean,
countries.
I think
Yes.
that makes a
Yeah,
lot of
a
sense.
lot of sense as well. So, I mean, there are lots of reasons, as we said, there is no one proven reason, but that is one of his strong theories. And so, and he wrote The Perfection Trap. If people are interested, there's a book all about this stuff, which is brilliant. So
How
I
long do you
just,
think now the work
yeah.
stream will take around the social ostracism to produce results that we can point to and say, this is what we need to do? What's the plan?
Well, the plan is to have a meeting probably in the next couple of months to start to plan the different work streams, which are research, resources and support, and education, because clearly we need to talk to young people about this and teachers and so on. If any of your listeners have cases or have experienced a significant case like this, I'd actually be interested to hear from them. They can be anonymized, but I'm collecting stories so that I can illustrate to the people sitting around the table and the people who need to be moved on this topic to understand the sort of impacts that this behavior can have. So it's going to be over the next year or so that it's happening. Nothing is happening fast, as you can
And
imagine. These things take
how
time.
might they get that information to you? I mean, they can always contact me, but if they can
Very happy
contact
to
you
be
directly,
emailed, yeah, either via LinkedIn or they can email me on my name, my dominique.thompson@me.com,
yeah,
which I'm sure you can put in the blurb of
we
the
will do. Yeah.
podcast. Yeah. But for cases and stories, I'm already working, unfortunately, with several bereaved parents as well as parents who are supporting their young person through a situation like this. And it is, I think, so helpful for people who are perhaps not as understanding of the impacts, for them to understand with stories what has happened. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be
I think
contacted.
you're right. If we can humanize it and take it
Yes,
away
it
from,
really helps.
hey, this is what's happening to people.
Yes.
And I think this is what's happening to kids is what we should,
Mm. Yes,
the
it
truth
is.
is.
It is.
You
Yeah.
have to be a very hard-hearted person not to care about that, to be honest. So,
I think it's not even that people don't care. I think they don't understand it and they think this is, oh, this is a phase or they'll grow out of it. They don't. They take this behavior on with them. They behave like this university, college, and in adult life. And that is not how we should be behaving in a civilized society.
listen, Dominique, super to have you back. Thank you. What a packed hour that's been. So, dominic.thompson@me.com.
Perfect.
right? We'll make sure that that link is there as well and people can have that. I just want to say thank you for raising the issues because it is super important, I know. And it goes right back to when I trained 30 years ago, learning about social death. And also somebody who's worked in prisons has seen the devastating impact of isolation,
Oh, dreadful.
those environments, etc., etc. So it is absolutely crucial piece of work, and I'm really, really supportive. I'm super happy that you came on and talked about it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Folks,
lovely.
thank you for coming on. Folks, I hope you found that really useful. Dominique has been a campaigner all her life for health and well-being and continues the good fight. She's well worth following, so follow her on LinkedIn. Do you have social media platforms as well?
Well, I do a bit on Facebook, my professional Facebook and my professional Instagram, but mainly I'm on LinkedIn for most of
LinkedIn,
my
place,
work.
yeah.
Yeah.
But follow her work. I'm lucky I've got a connection on her personal Facebook, so I see all the
Good.
wonderful things she's doing with her own family and holidays and so on, which are always inspiring stuff.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us today. We're going to say goodbye for now. Hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did, and do get in touch with Dominique if you have any case studies to share with her. And I'll see you all at the next episode.